My name is Vexer Krith, and I have witnessed many foolish things in my 300 cycles of life. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I saw in the grand arena of Nexus Prime that day. Nothing could have prepared any of us, really. You see, I am what you might call a sports commentator. Though sports seems an inadequate term for the blood-soaked spectacles we broadcast across the Galactic Federation. The arena games have entertained citizens for over 2 millennia, featuring the finest warriors from 1,000 worlds. And yes, before you ask, the mortality rate is exactly as high as you think it is. The day in question started like any other. 60,000 spectators filled the massive Colosseum, their various appendages, tentacles, and sensory organs all focused on the sandy floor below. The air buzzed with excitement and the distinct aroma of fear sweat from 12 different species. Quite pleasant, actually, if you acquire the taste. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished blob forms. I announced through the arena's speakers, my voice carrying across the vast space. Welcome to today's championship finals. The crowd roared. Well, most of them roared. The Zenthari delegation made their approval known through a series of harmonic screeches that could shatter glass, while the Morphoid representatives simply changed colors rapidly. Same enthusiasm, different expression. In the blue corner I continued, gesturing toward the massive gates, weighing in at 430 kilograms of pure muscle and rage, the undefeated champion of the Outer Rim territories, Brutax the Bone Crusher. The gates opened with a thunderous clang, and outstepped what could only be described as a walking nightmare. Brutax stood 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor plating that had deflected plasma bolts and vibroblades for the past 6 years. His 4 arms each wielded a different weapon, a neutron mace, a thermal lance, an energy whip, and a good old-fashioned spiked club for when things got personal. The crowd went absolutely wild. Seats shook as beings jumped, slithered, and oozed to their feet in appreciation. Brutax had never lost a match, never even been seriously injured. His opponents usually ended up as very expensive floor decoration. And in the red corner I continued, pausing for dramatic effect, representing the recently discovered species from the planet they call Earth. Weighing in at a mere 68 kilograms, please welcome Maya Thompson. The second gate opened, and out walked, well, this is where it gets interesting. Maya Thompson was, by arena standards, laughably small. She stood perhaps 1.7 meters tall, with only 2 arms and 2 legs arranged in the standard humanoid configuration. No natural armor, no venomous spines, no acid glands. Just pale pink skin, brown hair tied back in what I later learned was called a ponytail, and bright blue eyes that seemed oddly calm given the circumstances. She wore simple combat gear, reinforced clothing, basic protection, and carried a single weapon, a projectile firearm of primitive design, though our sensors indicated it fired metallic slugs at impressive velocities. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Is this some kind of joke? Bellowed Gornix, a Thorelian merchant in the premium seats. His translator rendered his question in standard galactic, though the tone of incredulous amusement needed no translation. She's so small, whispered Zalara, a Voidian dignitary. Are we certain this isn't some elaborate prank? I have to admit, I shared their confusion. The betting pools had already shifted dramatically against the human. Who could blame them? She looked like she might break if Brutax sneezed too hard. But here's the thing about assumptions. They have this wonderful habit of making you look like a complete fool right when you least expect it. Combatants, take your positions, I announced. Brutax lumbered to the center of the arena, his footsteps leaving deep impressions in the sand. He raised all 4 weapons and let out a war cry that made the arena's foundations vibrate. The sound was designed to intimidate, to freeze prey with terror. It had worked on his previous 87 opponents. Maya simply walked to her mark and stood there. No posturing, no war cries, no intimidation displays. She just waited. Begin, I shouted. What happened next defied every expectation, every calculation, every assumption we had made about this strange new species. Brutax charged. 430 kilograms of death and destruction thundered across the arena floor, weapons raised, roaring like the very gates of the underworld had opened. The ground shook. Dust clouds rose in his wake. It was magnificent and terrifying. Maya raised her weapon, aimed and fired 3 times in rapid succession. The crowd held its breath. Brutax's charge faltered for a moment. The projectiles had struck his chest armor, sending sparks flying but doing no visible damage, as expected. His armor had withstood plasma cannons, simple kinetic projectiles posed no threat. The champion's laughter boomed across the arena. "Is that the best your species can offer, little one?" Maya's response was barely audible, but our sensitive microphones picked it up. "Oh, that wasn't for you." Confusion rippled through the spectators. If the shots weren't meant for Brutax, then what? The answer came 14 seconds later. Maya calmly placed her weapon on the ground and stepped back, raising her hands in what appeared to be a gesture of surrender. The crowd erupted in surprised cheers. Finally, the human had come to her senses. The spectacle would end quickly and efficiently, as it should. "It appears our human challenger has decided discretion is the better part of valor," I announced, trying to inject some drama into what seemed like an anticlimactic conclusion. Brutax wins by. That's when the lights went out. Not just dimmed, not flickering. Completely, utterly, absolutely dark. The arena's backup lighting systems should have activated immediately. They didn't. Emergency protocols should have sealed the facility. They didn't. The force field barriers that kept spectators safe should have remained active. They didn't. In the space of 3 heartbeats, 60,000 beings found themselves sitting in perfect darkness with no way to know what was happening on the arena floor below. The silence was deafening. Then came the sounds. A wet thud followed by another. Then a strangled cry that definitely came from Brutax. More wet thuds. The distinctive sound of something heavy hitting sand. Then silence again. Technical difficulties. I announced, though my voice cracked slightly. "Please remain calm while we restore power." But power didn't return. Instead, we heard Maya's voice, somehow amplified without our equipment, carrying clearly through the darkness. "You might want to check your security footage," she said pleasantly. "Oh wait, that's not working either, is it?" Nervous laughter rippled through some sections of the crowd. Others began to shift uncomfortably. The morphoids had turned a rather alarming shade of purple, which in their species indicated extreme anxiety. "Your champion is fine," Maya continued conversationally. "Well, mostly fine. Unconscious, but breathing." Funny thing about assumptions. You assumed those 3 shots were meant to hurt him. Actually, they were targeted at very specific points in your arena's power grid. Amazing what you can accomplish when you have had time to study the schematics. A collective gasp rose from the audience. Studying the arena's technical specifications was impossible. The information was classified, protected by the highest levels of security. "Now, I know what you are thinking," Maya's voice carried on, eerily calm in the darkness. "How could a primitive human possibly infiltrate your systems?" The answer is surprisingly simple. We have been watching you for quite some time. Emergency lighting finally began to flicker on, casting eerie shadows throughout the arena. What we saw on the sandy floor below made more than a few spectators lose their lunch, metaphorically speaking. Some literally in the case of the Glutarians. Brutax lay motionless in the center of the arena, apparently unharmed but completely unconscious. Maya stood beside him, no longer looking quite so small or helpless. In her hands was a device none of us recognized, though it was clearly responsible for the electromagnetic pulse that had disabled our systems. "You see," she continued, her voice now carrying through the restored speakers, "when your species first made contact with Earth 6 months ago, you made a critical error. You assumed we were primitives because our technology looked different from yours. You assumed we were weak because we weren't built like living tanks. You assumed we were harmless because we seemed to prefer talking to fighting. The crowd was absolutely silent now. Even the usually chattering Pixian representatives had stopped their constant background chatter. But the biggest assumption you made, Maya said, turning to look directly up at the audience, was that we came here alone. That's when the real show began. The arena's main display screens, which had been dark since the power failure, suddenly blazed to life. But instead of showing the usual arena statistics, they displayed something that made every being in the facility question everything they thought they knew about the universe. 67 human ships hung in space above Nexus Prime. Not small exploration vessels or diplomatic craft. These were warships, sleek and predatory, their hulls bristling with weapons that our sensors couldn't quite identify. They had been there all along, invisible to our detection systems, waiting. "Meet the Earth Defense Fleet," Maya announced casually. "They have been having a lovely time studying your defensive systems while you have been watching me play with your champion." The implications hit the crowd like a physical blow. If humans could infiltrate their most secure facilities, disable their most advanced systems, and position a fleet without detection, then everything they knew about the balance of power in the galaxy had just changed. Drastically. "Now," Maya continued, her tone becoming slightly more serious, "we need to have a conversation. All of us. About assumptions, about underestimation, and about the future of human galactic relations." I found my voice, though it came out as more of a squeak than the commanding presence I usually projected. What do you want?" Maya smiled, and there was something in that expression that made my skin crawl. Not malicious, exactly, but knowing. Like she was privy to information that the rest of us couldn't even imagine. "What we want," she said, "is very simple. We want you to remember this moment. We want you to remember that the small, primitive humans you thought you could easily dominate just took control of your most secure facility without firing a shot in anger. We want you to remember that we did this not with superior firepower, but with careful planning, patience, and intelligence." She paused, letting that sink in. "And most importantly," Maya concluded, "we want you to remember that we chose to demonstrate our capabilities rather than simply destroy you outright. Because despite what you might think, humans prefer cooperation to conquest." The arena remained absolutely silent as the implications of her words settled over the audience like a heavy blanket. "The next time you encounter a species you think you understand," she said softly, "you might want to consider the possibility that you are wrong." The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I could hear my own breathing through the arena's audio system, which was embarrassing but somehow seemed appropriate given the circumstances. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the usually restless Centaurian delegation sat frozen in their seats like statues. Then Senator Valdris of the High Council stood up in the VIP section. He was a pompous Altarian with too many eyes and an unfortunate tendency to speak before thinking. Today, that tendency was about to get him into more trouble than usual. "And this is preposterous," he declared, his voice booming across the arena. "One small demonstration does not prove anything. Your fleet could be holographic projections. Your infiltration could be a lucky accident. You cannot expect the entire Galactic Federation to bow down to a handful of primitives." Maya looked up at him with what I can only describe as amused patience. "Senator Valdris, isn't it? Third-term representative from Alteria Prime, married to Councillor Nexia, father of 4, owner of significant mining interests in the Kepler system." Valdris's expression shifted from outrage to confusion. "How could you possibly know? Your favorite breakfast is grilled Fleek's eggs with imported Terran coffee, which you have been purchasing illegally through black market traders for the past 2 years. You have a gambling problem that's cost you approximately 47,000 credits this season alone. Last week, you voted against the agricultural subsidy bill, despite promising the Farmers' Union you would support it." The senator's face had gone through several interesting color changes during this recitation. By the end, he was a rather alarming shade of purple. "Oh," Maya continued cheerfully, "and you are currently having an affair with your secretary, which your wife doesn't know about. Yet. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs and not-so-subtle laughter. Several news drones, which had somehow continued operating despite the power issues, swiveled to focus on the increasingly uncomfortable senator. "These are lies," Valdris sputtered. "Fabrications. How dare you?" "Actually," Maya interrupted gently, "they are all completely accurate. We have been monitoring your personal communications for the past month. Along with everyone else in this arena, of course." The murmurs stopped abruptly. You could have heard a pin drop, assuming pins made noise when falling through various atmospheric compositions. "Every conversation," Maya continued, her tone remaining conversational despite delivering what amounted to a galactic bombshell. "Every personal message, every private meeting, every classified discussion about how to handle the human problem. Yes, Counselor Thrace, we know about your little committee." Counselor Thrace, a reptilian being from the Sauron Collective, visibly flinched at the mention of his name. The committee Maya referenced was supposed to be ultra-classified, designed to develop strategies for containing human expansion into the galaxy. Apparently it wasn't classified enough. "Now," Maya said, raising her voice slightly to address the entire arena, "before anyone else decides to test whether we are bluffing, let me save you some time. We are not." She reached into her gear and pulled out a small device that looked remarkably unremarkable. Just a black rectangle with a few blinking lights. This little gadget contains detailed intelligence files on every major government official, military leader, and business mogul in this sector. Personal information, financial records, communication logs, strategic plans, classified research projects, and yes, embarrassing personal secrets. The implications were staggering. If humans had penetrated galactic security to this extent, then every government, every military, every corporation was potentially compromised. "But wait," I managed to croak into my microphone. "There's more, isn't there?" Maya grinned at me, and I realized she had been waiting for exactly that question. "Oh, you are good at this, Vexer. Yes, there's definitely more." She gestured toward the display screens, which shifted to show a new image. In a star map of the local galactic region, with thousands of glowing dots scattered across known space. Each dot represents a human agent currently embedded in galactic society, Maya explained casually. Diplomats, traders, tourists, refugees, students, workers, people you have interacted with, done business with, trusted with sensitive information, people who have been quietly observing, learning, and reporting back to Earth for months. The crowd was beginning to show signs of panic. Several beings near the exits had started edging toward the doors, only to discover that the arena's security locks were still engaged. We were all trapped in here with this revelation, whether we wanted to be or not. Now, before anyone starts thinking about purges or witch hunts, Maya continued, "Let me be clear about something. These agents aren't sleeper soldiers or saboteurs. They are observers. Their job was to learn about galactic civilization, to understand how things work, and to assess whether humanity could find a place in the wider community." She paused, letting that sink in. "The good news is that most of them filed positive reports. Galactic civilization, for all its flaws, is generally preferable to isolation. Most species are reasonable, even if they do have an unfortunate tendency toward arrogance when dealing with newcomers." That was pointed but fair. "The bad news," Maya continued, "is that a significant minority filed reports recommending that humanity should consider galactic civilization a potential threat to be neutralized rather than a community to join." The temperature in the arena seemed to drop several degrees. Even the usually hot-blooded Peronian delegates had gone quiet. "So we had a choice to make," Maya said, her tone becoming more serious. "We could withdraw from galactic contact entirely, which would disappoint those of us who hoped for peaceful cooperation. We could prepare for conflict, which would be expensive and wasteful for everyone involved. Or we could arrange a demonstration." She gestured around the arena with both hands. "This is the demonstration. Not of our ability to destroy, but of our ability to infiltrate, analyze, and neutralize threats without resort to violence." Consider it a very pointed diplomatic message. Admiral Zox of the Federation Navy, a grizzled veteran of 3 galactic wars, stood up slowly in the military section. What exactly are you proposing, human? Maya turned to face him directly. Admiral Zox, 47 years of distinguished service, veteran of the Krentak Rebellion and the Mordinian Crisis, decorated for valor on 16 separate occasions, currently commanding the 3rd Fleet from your flagship, the Eternal Vigilance, which is positioned approximately 14 light hours from here. The Admiral nodded grimly. Your intelligence files are impressive. What do you want? What we want, Maya replied, is a seat at the table. Full membership in the Galactic Federation, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. What we are offering in return is something the galaxy has never had before. Which is? Prompted Admiral Zox. Species that specializes in knowing things, Maya said simply. You have spent millennia developing bigger weapons, stronger armor, faster ships. We spent our time developing better ways to gather information, to understand complex systems, to solve problems through intelligence rather than force. She gestured toward Brutax, who was beginning to stir slightly but remained unconscious. Your champion is a perfect example of galactic thinking. Overwhelming force applied directly to the problem. Very effective in many situations, but not particularly subtle. The arena's medical team had arrived and were checking on Brutax. Their scanners showed he was completely unharmed, just unconscious. Whatever Maya had done to him had been precisely calibrated. Humans prefer the indirect approach, Maya continued. Why fight your way through a fortress when you can convince the guards to open the gates? Why destroy an enemy when you can convince them to become an ally? Why wage war when you can achieve your objectives through careful planning and superior information? Counselor Uran of the Trade Federation, a slug-like being with an impressive talent for economics, raised one of his many appendages. And what guarantees do we have that humanity won't use these capabilities against legitimate Federation interests? Maya smiled at him. Counselor Uran, your concerns are understandable, given that your personal fortune is built largely on exploiting information asymmetries in interstellar commodity markets. You are worried that human information gathering capabilities might interfere with your business model. Counselor Uran's skin shifted to a defensive shade of yellow. That's not. Oh, it absolutely is, Maya interrupted cheerfully. But here's the thing. We are not particularly interested in disrupting existing trade relationships. We are more interested in preventing unnecessary conflicts, exposing genuine threats to galactic security, and helping to resolve problems before they escalate into shooting wars. She paused and looked around the arena, making eye contact with various members of the audience. For example, she continued, we are aware of at least 17 potential crisis situations currently developing across the galaxy, with territorial disputes, resource conflicts, religious tensions, and economic instabilities. Most of them could be resolved peacefully if the right information reached the right people at the right time. And you are offering to provide that information? Asked Admiral Zox. We are offering to help coordinate responses to threats that affect everyone, Maya clarified. Think of us as consultants, specialists in knowing what's really going on and suggesting effective solutions. The crowd was beginning to murmur among themselves, processing this unexpected turn of events. What had started as a simple arena match had become a diplomatic revolution. Of course, Maya added with a slight smile, there is one small demonstration we haven't completed yet. My blood turned to ice. What do you mean? Well, Maya said, we have shown you that we can infiltrate your systems, gather your intelligence, and neutralize your champions without violence. But we haven't actually demonstrated what happens if you decide to treat us as enemies rather than potential allies. The arena's display screens shifted again, this time showing a tactical overview of the Nexus Prime system. The 67 human ships were clearly visible, along with their projected weapons, ranges, and targeting solutions. Every major installation in this system is currently targeted by our fleet, Maya announced matter-of-factly. Military bases, industrial facilities, government centers, communication arrays. If we were actually hostile, you would all be dead already. The collective gasp from the audience was audible even over the arena's ambient noise. But Maya continued quickly, "We didn't come here to conquer or destroy. We came here to make a point. The point being that humans are very, very good at planning ahead." She reached down and helped the now conscious Brutax to his feet. The champion looked confused but unharmed, which seemed to reassure the medical team. "Brutax," Maya said gently, "you fought well. In a fair fight with conventional weapons, you would have won easily. But humans rarely fight fair when there are alternatives." The champion nodded slowly, still shaking off the effects of whatever had knocked him unconscious. "What did you do to me?" "Pressure point technique," Maya replied. "Non-lethal, temporary, precise. We studied your species' physiology for months to make sure it would work without causing permanent damage." She turned back to address the arena at large. "That's what we bring to the galactic community. Preparation, planning, and precision. The ability to solve problems without breaking things unnecessarily." Senator Valdris, who had been unusually quiet since his personal life had been aired publicly, finally found his voice again. "And if we refuse your offer?" Maya shrugged. "Then we go home, close our borders, and wait to see how things develop. But given what we have learned about galactic politics, we don't think you will be refusing." "Why not?" demanded the senator. Maya's smile turned slightly predatory. "Because, Senator, you need us more than we need you. Your Federation is facing 17 different potential crises, your military is spread thin across too many fronts, and your intelligence services apparently have more holes than a Centaurian fishing net." She gestured toward the fleet display. "We, on the other hand, have been preparing for galactic contact for decades. We are ready for whatever comes next." The truth of her words settled over the arena like a heavy blanket. The Galactic Federation, for all its power and prestige, had been caught completely off guard by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Admiral Zox spoke first. "What are your terms?" "A full Federation membership," Maya replied promptly. "Voting rights, trade privileges, defensive alliance status. In exchange, we provide intelligence coordination services and strategic planning support." "And your fleet?" asked Counselor Thrace. "Goes home," Maya said simply. "This was a demonstration, not an invasion. Though we will be maintaining a small diplomatic presence and, naturally, our embedded observers will continue their work." The arena erupted in discussion as various factions debated among themselves. But I could see the way this was going to end. The humans had played their hand perfectly, demonstrating both capability and restraint in exactly the right proportions. "Well," I announced into my microphone, trying to inject some humor into the tense situation, "this has certainly been the most interesting arena match in recorded history." Maya looked up at me and winked. "Just wait until you see what we do for an encore." And as the Federation delegates began the process of what would ultimately become humanity's rapid integration into galactic society, I found myself wondering what other surprises this remarkable species had in store for us. 14 seconds after Maya Thompson dropped her weapon, the arena had indeed become empty of illusions about human capabilities. But it had become full of possibilities for the future. The humans had arrived, and galactic civilization would never be the same.